I'm a healthcare assistant at a nursing home for elderly people with dementia. I've worked there for about a half a year, and on one particular night shift, all our residents are in their beds in their individual rooms. My partner is off on a break, and the nurse is upstairs at the nurses' station, so no one else is around. I'm assisting a bedbound gentleman who has schizophrenia and dementia, who doesn't usually talk, other than to yell, "What the fuck are you doing?" at us when we try to help him to have a drink. He doesn't understand why he's there because of his mental health conditions. So, I'm helping this guy, and he looks around the room really slowly with his eyes, resting his gaze at various points every few seconds, when his eyes rest on me, and he says, "We're all here." A bit creepy, but as I was pleased that the gentleman spoke to me, we've been encouraging him lots lately to use his words instead of just screaming at us. I asked him, "Who's all here?" He replied with, "They died here, and I'll die here." And then he looked right at me and said, "You'll die here if you don't leave first. Everyone will leave or die." Again, a tad creepy, but I assumed that he was just having a bit of a schizophrenic episode, or even that he had worked out that he was a resident in a nursing home and wanted to talk about it. I walk out of his room, and as I head down the corridor, the emergency alarm bell starts ringing. I check my pager, and it's the room of the gentleman I was just assisting, who doesn't know how to use the call bell to set off the alarm, and isn't physically able to either. I rush back to his room, and he's looking at the floor opposite to his bed and screaming and crying and shouting. "You're cruel, Jack, you're cruel! The poor children! The poor little babies!" I slammed the light on and ran up to him. He was still screaming something that sounded like, "Their little blue lips, stop showing me, Jack." No one in the room but him and me. The nurse eventually arrives, also responding to his emergency alarm. It gives him medication to calm him and puts it down to an episode, as I originally did. It wasn't until my partner got off her break. She's been working at the home for 12 years. The nurse only started here in the last month or so, that I learnt of a gentleman who previously lived in that residence home for a couple of months before he passed away, about 10 years ago, was a 90-odd-year-old man called Jack, who had been convicted of murdering his 2 children when he was younger. The current resident had no way of knowing this either, as he wasn't in the home when this Jack man was, and we won't speak about one resident in front of others, as we aren't allowed to due to confidentiality. Also, how did he use his bell to call us and press the emergency alarm? It's something he hasn't been able to do since he moved into the home. I guess it could just be explained as an aptly timed schizophrenic episode with coincidental similarities. Either way though, I won't be doing night shifts here anymore. I'm not too sure where to begin with this, since I've only ever told my wife about these situations before. I'll just start here. I have a best friend named Wesley. We're so close that we're practically brothers. And weirdly, we've always been on the same page with where we are in life, how we're feeling that week, what we've been thinking. So much so that we even have a word to describe our freaky frequencies being synced. We met in sophomore year of high school, where he soon moved down the street from me with his mum in 2011. I also have 2 other very close friends that I see regularly. Nick, whom I've seen since 8th grade, and Daniel, who I met through Wesley. Okay, so names of the primary people have been established. Let's get to where it started in the summer of 2013. So, Wesley called me up to tell me about a dream that he had the previous night. In his words, he said, "Dude, I was with my grandma, Emily, at the house when we both had the urge to go up to the garage. We step in and there's this evil, menacing, smiling fox head with a yellow top hat floating next to a whiteboard. It was gesturing to us to have a seat in front of him. We sit down and he began to write something, but as soon as we begin to read it, it just disappears. He writes the words again, but like last time, they just disappear. The third time he writes it, we're both able to read it at the same time. Gorgo. And then I just wake up. I told him that sounded pretty intense and weird. He agrees and also tells me another weird thing about the dream. When's the last time you actually read something in a dream? To be honest, I don't think I ever have, let alone retain what I read. I told him that and also said that I know the name Gorgo. I've heard it before. So we met up and did some research and found some things on Gorgo. Specifically, it's a Greek demon who brings death and pain to people. We both kind of laughed and said that it was a bit trippy and just left it at that. Months went by and we found out that his grandmother, Emily, developed a brain tumor, and unfortunately, she passed 2 months after that. The first time we hung out after that, he brought up the dream again, and what we found out about the name Gorgo, and the weird coincidence of his grandmother's death. We both thought that it was just that, a weird coincidence. But this is when he tells me that the dream wasn't the only thing going on. Wes is logical, scientific and smart. He doesn't spout paranormal things, like ever. He loves science, reasoning and logic. So when he told me about more experiences, I was shocked and skeptical to say the least, thinking that he was just bullshitting me. He is a good bullshitter. He told me about his first run-in with whatever this was. A couple of weeks after moving in, he said that he heard a little girl run down his hallway, laughing. He, for whatever reason, didn't think much of it. But later on that week, while trying to get some sleep, he heard a little girl laugh in the closet next to his bed. This obviously got his attention this time, and he turned on the light, opened his closet door, and there was nothing. He slept with the light on after that, and ultimately dismissed it for just being too tired. He told me he didn't think much of it until maybe a month or so later, when he was hanging out with his cousin and his cousin's girlfriend Ashley. They were all at Wesley's house. His cousin's girlfriend remarked, "Oh, you live in Jenna's old house." Jenna and Ashley used to be best friends. Wesley was about to say that he knew that, but couldn't finish his sentence due to Ashley's interruption. "Have you heard about the little girl yet? She laughs a lot." Wesley said no, as to not freak anyone out, he told me. But inside, he was nervous because now someone else, who had no idea of knowing what Wes was experiencing, went through the same thing. He also told me of apparitions in his room, of a tall black figure standing over him at night, his mum seeing an electric field static distorted ball thing, as he described it, coming up from under Wesley's bedroom door, and whiz right past her ear, sounding like static in the hallway. This was all really cool for me, if I'm being honest, as I love reading about this stuff, but nothing ever happened to me. That is, until it did. Wesley, Daniel, Nick and I were all hanging out in what we call the creepy room. Another not as weird story, but that's for another time. I was sitting on a chair in view of the family room, and I can see enough to tell if someone walks through it. We're all chatting while Daniel is playing on his phone when I hear the sliding door in the kitchen slam shut, the sound of the alarm confirming to us that a door closed. I look around and see that Nick and Wesley, they didn't notice straight away. Daniel, however, met eyes with me and said, "Did you hear the door close too?" I nodded with goosebumps all over me, just like now writing this story, as his mum was away out of town, so it was just us. Wes and Nick stopped talking and said, "What door?" We told them that it sounded like the kitchen sliding glass door just slammed shut, and asked if they heard the alarm chime, but they didn't. We all go out to the kitchen and see that the door is closed and latched. This tells us that if someone closed it, they had to have closed it from the inside, as it's latched and locked. That means that someone would have had to have come through the front door, walked through the family room and into the kitchen to do that. But I definitely would have seen them, and I didn't, obviously. Also, the front door is locked, and the alarm chime only went off once. It goes off when you close and open the door leading outside. If someone opened the front door or opened the sliding door, the chime would have gone off. Only going off once means that the sliding door was open to begin with, but yet we were in the kitchen 10 minutes before going to the creepy room and it was closed. We obviously searched the house with weapons in case of an intruder, but to no avail. It was just us. We still, to this day, have no way to explain how that was all possible. And with Wesley's experiences in that house, we all kind of just accepted that it was something to do with what we couldn't explain. So, for the rest of the night, we just hung outside.